Chapter 4 deals with flow control statements. That is, bits of code that control the flow or what order lines of code execute. In lecture and class, I'll go into more detail about each of the 3 different flow control statements we'll be working with in this chapter. But you've already worked with 2 different flow control statements. You've worked with do and order statements, in which every line of code inside executes sequentially one after another, and you've dealt with do together statement, where the lines of code inside execute simultaneously or at the same time. The first exercise in chapter 4 deals with another type of flow control statement called an if-else statement. And what this flow control statement does, when you reach the if-else statement in the code, it checks a condition. And I'll go over in class the different types of conditions. But it checks to see if a condition is true, and if so, it executes that code. If it's not true, it'll either skip over the if statement, or if you have an else added to it, it might execute a different set of code. So the first exercise, the user story, is scene 3 of a movie. A princess meets a mute dragon and says hello. The dragon just looks at her. She asks it, "Can you understand me?" The dragon shakes his head up and down to indicate yes. She says, "Can you speak?" The dragon shakes his head sideways to indicate no. She says, "Can you only answer yes or no questions?" The dragon shakes his head yes. She says, "Are you a tame dragon?" The dragon shakes his head no. So that is the user story for it. It's at the bottom of page 110. So we could create 2 different methods here. We could create a method for the dragon called shake head no, in which he moved his head from side to side. And we could create a second method called shake head yes, in which he moves his head up and down. But since the movements are basically the same, he's just moving his head back and forth, and the only thing different is the direction, we can create a single method called shake head, and then we can test to see which direction we want it to go. So the way we'll test that is, if you'll remember when we used parameters previously, like in the jump for the fish exercise, the parameter made the method act a little bit differently each time depending on the value of the parameter, depending on what argument you passed with it. If you gave it the parameter being distance, if you gave an argument of 15 meters as the distance he should jump, then the jump method looked different than if you gave it an argument of 5 meters. So we're going to use a parameter in the same way here to make one method do 2 different things. We're going to create a parameter called yes or no. Then every time you tell the dragon to shake his head, you have to give that a value. Is it yes? Is it no? And then that will determine whether or not his head shakes up and down or left and right. So let's begin by adding our dragon to the world. And I'm going to add the one from medieval. But there are a couple of different dragons in your gallery. You can use any one you like. Just make sure that you've got him moved back enough that you can see his full head. All right, and he's going to be talking to a princess, and she is also in medieval, so add that to the world. And rotate her so she's facing the dragon. And again, make sure that his head is visible so you'll be able to see him nodding or shaking his head no. All right, once you've got your 2 characters in place, click Done. All of this action, the user story tells us takes place in scene 3, so let's click on World and create a new method. We'll call it Play Scene 3. And that is where we're going to put all the storyline of the princess asking the dragon if he can speak and him shaking his head and all of that. All right, to get him to shake his head, that is where we're going to be using an if-else statement. So let's create a method that will be doing 2 things. It will allow him to shake his head yes, it will allow him to shake his head no. So select the dragon. This is something he can do. Create a new method for him called shake head. And it is camel case, meaning the first word is not capitalized. Each subsequent word is capitalized. There's no spacing. So shake head, click OK. We get the new tab opened in the editing area, and we get the new tile over in the details area. All right. Again, what we're going to do is every time we tell him to shake his head, we need to know if he's going to be shaking his head yes or shaking his head no. So we need to pass that information along with the method. And you want to pass extra information along with the method in order to make it do different things. You have a parameter set. So in this shake head method, choose create new parameter, and we'll just call it yes or no. We could have called it direction, that would be the direction he shook his head. We could have called it nodding or not. Many other words. They chose yes or no. So following along with the book, the parameter's name is yes or no, and its data type is a string. We will be typing out the word yes or the word no. So click OK, and you'll see it appears on the top line because it is a parameter. It's got an ABC because it is a string data type. It's right beside dragon.shakehead. All right, and we're checking a condition. We're going to see when we call the method, did we give yes or no a value of yes, or did we give yes or no a value of no? And that will determine which direction his head moves. So pull up an if else from the bottom. It's right after the do together statement we've already used. And it's going to ask you what is the condition. You're going to have to set a placeholder. Just put true. And that's what the structure of an if else statement looks like. You've got if, and then the condition that will be checked. If the condition is actually true, you've got this first do nothing. That'll be where the code that executes if the condition is met. And then you've got an else with a do nothing. You can put other code here that could execute if the condition is not met. Or you can leave the else empty and it'll just, if the condition is not met, it'll go on and do any code underneath it. Okay, let's put the actual condition we want to be checking here. We want to know when we call shake head, we're going to give yes or no a value of either yes or no. So we only need to test for one. Let's say if the value of yes or no is yes, then we want the dragon to move his head up and down. Otherwise, we want him to move his head left and right. So to get that condition set, take the yes or no tile and drag and drop it on that placeholder of true. And then you'll see you have two options. Yes or no has the value, and that's double equal sign, or yes or no does not have the value, which is exclamation mark equal sign. We want to know if yes or no has the value. So the top option has a value of other, and then type in, see how the book does it, lowercase letters, the word yes. Click OK. So it reads, if yes or no has a value of yes, then we want him to nod his head. So let's write the code that makes him nod his head in that first do nothing underneath if. So we need to drill down in the dragon, the object tree, find his head, which will be in his neck. And once you have it selected in the object tree, the yellow bounding box will be just around his head. So to get him to nod his head yes, let's have the head turn, put this on the first do nothing. We're going to have it turn forward, and the amount, right now let's go ahead and put it a quarter revolution. The amount they want it to turn, excuse me, is a little more than 1/5. So it's going to be 0.06 is the amount of rotation. And he's going to be doing, we're going to be writing that line of code, having his head turn 0.06 several times in this one method. So rather than having to keep typing that and keep adding that same amount, we're going to go ahead and store that value in a variable. That way, later on, if we want to change the amount, we don't have to change it in one place. So in this dragon shake head method, let's create a new variable and call it head movement. And that will be the amount of turning his head will do, whether he's shaking his head yes or shaking his head no. This is going to be a number data type. And we will go ahead and give it a value in the dialog box of other 0.06. And click OK. Click OK. Okay, so we've got shake head method, a parameter of yes or no, and one variable called head movement, which is a number data type, has a value of 0.06. All right, so now the first line underneath the if statement is if the value of yes or no is yes, then the dragon's head should turn forward. And now the number of revolutions, let's change that to the expression head movement, which of course is 0.06. All right, and we don't want that to take a full second for him just to tuck his chin under for the nod. So let's set a duration of a quarter second, 0.25 seconds. All right, that's going to have his chin move down towards his chest. Now we want it to move back up into position, back level, and then back up so his chin is in the air. So actually we want him to do head movement twice. So lifts his head all the way up so his chin's all the way up in the air. So with the head still selected, the next line under if should be head turn, and this time backward, and the amount is going to be the expression head movement, which again, that will only bring him back up to level. We want him to tilt it all the way back. We want him to go twice as far. So we're going to use the math tools to tinker with the head movement revolutions, the amount it turned, just like we did with when we had the girl move towards the horse. We had her move distance to horse meters, and then we subtracted half a meter so she wasn't so close. In the same way, this second line of the nod, he's going to turn his head backward, head movement revolutions times 2. So you'd find math, head movement times is the third option, and multiply it by 2. That just means he will move his head back twice as far as he moved it down. All right, and since he's moving it twice as far, it should take twice as long. So set a duration for that second line of half a second. And then finally, his head is tilted all the way back. We want him to go back to level. So the third and final line under if is head turn. And let's have it turn forward again. And the amount will be the expression head movement. And give that a 1/4 second duration. All right, so when you call shake head, it'll say what is the value of yes or no. If you give that value yes, those 3 lines will execute. His head will turn forward, his chin tucked in, then it will turn backward with his chin up in the air and his head all the way back. Then it will turn forward again back to level. All right. You don't have to put anything under the else statement for your if-else statements. You can just check a condition and have code that only executes if the condition is met. Otherwise, nothing happens. In this case, though, our condition is what is the value of yes or no. If the value is yes, we want his head to nod up and down. If the value is no, we want his head to go back and forth. So we will have something underneath the else part of this statement. And it'll just be the dragon moving his head the opposite direction. Basically the same code, just using different directions. So underneath else, let's have the head turn right this time. And the amount will be the expression head movement, which again is 0.06 revolutions, 1/4 second duration. All right, line 2 of the else statement is head turn left, and then the expression head movement, but remember we want it to move twice as far. So once you have head movement down, click the drop down arrow and choose math, and then head movement times 2, and then set a duration for half a second for that one. So again, line 2 of the else statement is the head turns left, head movement times 2 for a duration of half a second. All right, and now we want him to move back to center. So the third and final line under else is head turn right, the expression head movement. And let that have a duration of a 1/4 second. Okay, so that is the shake head method. Calling this method, every time you call it, it's going to say what is the value of yes or no. If you give it a value of yes, his head will move up and down. If you give it a value of no, his head will move left and right. All right, now we're ready to put this all together and use this shake head method and tell our story in scene 3. So switch to the World Play Scene 3 tab and pull up a do in order. All right, and the first thing that's going to happen is you can go ahead and close up the dragon in the object tree. First thing that's going to happen is the princess is going to speak. So select the princess and have her say other hello. And the book has a duration of 1 second, but by default, every line takes 1 second, so you can just leave that off if you want. Now we need a way for the princess to realize that the dragon is not answering. We need a pause here. And Alice comes built in with the third from the last item across the bottom is a wait line. So pull up the wait line as our second line of code. And let's have it just pause the story. That's all the wait does. We're going to pause the story for 3 seconds, which gives her long enough to realize the dragon is not answering her. Okay, line 3, the princess will say other Can you understand me? That has a 2-second duration. Okay, now is the first time the dragon will be answering her. He'll be using the shake head method. And he can understand her, so we want him to nod his head yes. So select the dragon, pull over shake head, and it's going to say, okay, what is the value of yes or no? In this case, he can understand her, so the value will be yes. You can click that or click on other and type out the word yes. Just make sure it's in all lowercase. Just it should match exactly what you set the condition for your if-else statement. It has to look exactly like this. Otherwise, that code will not execute. So the same case, if you made it all caps in the shake head method, it needs to be all caps in the placing 3 method. Okay, so he shakes his head yes, he can understand her. Now the princess says, other, can you speak? That has a 2-second duration. Right, and this time the answer is no. So we're going to have the dragon shake head. Pull that over. And this time we're going to give yes or no a value of no. So click other and just type NO, lowercase, click OK. All right, now the princess say, other, can you only answer yes or no questions? Try this one more time. Princess say, other, can you only answer yes or no questions? That is a little bit longer line, so give that a duration of 3 seconds. The answer to that is yes, so let's do a dragon. Shake head. Yes or no has a value of yes. And then her last question, princess say, other, are you a tame dragon? And that is a 2-second duration. And then he answers that, and the question is no. So the last dragon, shake head. And this time the value of yes or no will be no. So again, reading it out, placing 3 has a do in order. The princess says hello. We wait 3 seconds. The princess says, can you understand me? 2-second duration. Then we have the shake head method with the value of yes or no being yes. Princess says, can you speak? 2-second duration. Shake head method, value of yes or no is no. Princess say, can you only understand yes or no questions? With a 3-second duration. Shake head method, yes or no has a value of yes. And then finally, princess say, are you a tame dragon? 2-second duration. Dragon shake head, yes or no, has a value of no. For the shake head method, you've got a parameter called yes or no, and you've got a variable called head movement. The head movement variable has a value of 0.06. The structure of the method is an if-else statement. The condition you're testing with the if is what is the value of yes or no. If it is a value of yes or no is yes, then the dragon's head turns forward, head movement for a 1/4 second. Then it turns backward, head movement times 2 for 1/2 second. Then its head turns forward, head movement for a 1/4 second. If the value of yes or no parameter is not yes, if it's anything else, then the dragon's head turns right, head movement revolutions, taking a 1/4 second. Then turns left, head movement times 2, taking a 1/2 second. Then turns back to right, head movement revolutions, taking a 1/4 second. So those are the 2 methods that you will be creating. Now we just need to call placing 3 in my first method. So drag over that tile and test your movie. She should say hello. There should be a significant pause here. Then she asks the questions. He should answer yes to the first one, no to the second one, yes, and no. Okay, save this file as your last name, first initial underscore noddingDragon. And upload that to Moodle. And I will go over, like I said, the other flow control statements and all of the different types of conditions that can be set in order to use these flow control statements. We'll do that in class.